We want to keep that. Because everyone, they say they use it as a saving. Probably one of the best bets.
Okay.
Hi. How are you?
Yeah. It was out. Yeah. As long as it's consistent, right? They were saying that about first season.
So number 2 and number 9 are removed. No amendment, but it just means we do a shorter agenda for. Yep. All these people are here to comment, but we didn't comment. Yep. Yep.
Well, you're okay. Won't you own the green house?
Number 1 should not pass.
The dog street ran down there or whatever, they do it that way.
Taylor drew the short straw today, huh?
Who did? Yeah, it looked like it, so. Putting the pathway in their people. Yeah, they usually don't. Yeah, so Pioneer Irrigation, yeah, they are very stingy about pathways and everything. Okay. I don't have my. I don't have my gavel. You're on my echo. We'd like to welcome. There we go. Okay, we'd like to welcome everyone out this evening. It is just after 6 o'clock, so we'll begin our regularly scheduled city council meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. So we did have a workshop prior to this regarding our CDBG program. I appreciate that presentation, the information that was provided, and the questions that were answered. So we will begin this evening with an invocation. Glad to see that Madam Geyer was able to bring her wonderful husband down here, Chaplain Norm Geyer, to offer our invocation. So Norm is chaplain of the Idaho State Veterans Home in Boise. Appreciate you being here this evening. I don't know if it's so Debbie can keep an eye on you tonight, keep you in line, but we're grateful to have you here. So if you could please stand for that prayer and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our gracious and loving Heavenly Father, thank you first of all for all of those that are gathered here today. Thank you for your many abundant blessings. Thank you for the health you give us. Thank you for the freedoms we embrace here in our country, so that those who have given the ultimate sacrifice so that we could enjoy our freedoms. Lord, I thank you for all you have done for us in loving us and given us the ability to make a choice to either love you or not love you, but you love us instead, in spite of that. Lord, in scriptures you have said that your citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, since You have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore, I pray for our mayor, for the various levels of city officials, employees, and in particular for this assembled council. And I'm asking you that you would graciously grant them wisdom and to govern amid the conflicting interests of our nation and our time, a sense of welfare and true needs of our people, confidence in what is good and fitting, and the ability to work together in harmony, even when there is honest disagreement, personal peace in their lives, and joy in their tasks. I pray for the agenda set before them today, and please give us the assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in our great city of Caldwell. In this, I pray your blessed name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Chaplain Geyer. We appreciate that, and not only that, but everything that you and your wonderful wife mean to our community and to our city. We really couldn't get by without her and without you. So thank you so much for all that you do. So, Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Doty?
Here.
Stoddard?
Here.
Register?
Here.
McGee?
Here.
Allgood?
Here.
Williams?
Here.
Thank you very much. So we do have a full quorum with us this evening. So Councilor McGee is joining us via Zoom. So we would just remind council that to make sure that you do speak into your microphone to ensure that Councilor McGee can hear everything that's going on here, and also always need that for the record also. Are there any conflict of interest declarations from any council members regarding any item on the agenda this evening? Okay, and we do not have any special presentations, and there is nobody signed up under audience participation. So that will move us right into, we do have, I think, one amendment to the agenda. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Amendments to the agenda would to remove item number 2 under new business. The public hearing for Community Development Block Grant Action Plan will be held on August 1st, 2023.
Very good. So that would be a motion to amend the agenda to remove item number 2 under new business, and with a note that that'll be heard on August 1st. Is that correct? August 1st of 2023. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilor Doty and a second from Councilor Stoddard to amend the agenda as noted. Is there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Do we have a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Doty and a second from Councilor Stoddard to approve the consent calendar as printed. Is there any discussion on that motion? Madam Clerk, if you'd please call the roll.
Doty?
Yes.
Stoddard?
Yes.
Register?
Yes.
McGee?
Yes.
Allgood? Williams?
Yes.
Very good. So that motion passes unanimously and those items have been approved. That moves us into old business. We have one item under old business. This is an item that was continued from July 5th, 2023. This is case number SUB 23-9 Prairie Creek. So probably just go over a few items, kind of to remind us where we're at and clarification on that. So this was, again, heard on July 5th, that request for this subdivision for Prairie Creek. We had a number of people that signed up to testify on that. The public hearing portion was closed, so there will be no testimony taken this evening. It was closed and discussion did commence with council in that regards, and there was 2 questions that council wanted to have some answers to before a decision was made. And so those questions were, what is the average size of home for the development? And then the second question was, will the pathway connect with the proposed housing developed scheduled to be built across from the Phyllis Canal? So you have received 2 items, one from Trilogy Development in regards to the approximate percentage lot or homes, size of the homes, and the percentage of what those homes will be within the subdivision. And then also a email from Dave Watkins, Assistant Superintendent at Pioneer Irrigation. And Alex, in a minute, may have you just kind of go over those that were presented. But before that, just want some, just a little bit of maybe guidance from our city attorney in regards to as we move forward on this, with knowing that public testimony is closed. I know that our July 5th hearing that, so I know that Councilor Stoddard was not here at that hearing, so just a proper way to move forward, and just these are again recommendations from our city attorney in regards when a member of the council is not here and then an item is continued to later on.
Mayor and Council, so by way of reminder, this is a quasi-judicial decision. So if a council member was not present for when those facts were presented, it would be suggested that that council member do not vote in this particular issue because of its quasi-judicial nature. You would need to be caught up on the facts that were presented back at that time. And so I would encourage any council member that wasn't present for that to maybe get out on the voting on this. Do I have any further questions on that particular issue?
Even if the councilman reviewed the minutes and you still can't do it, huh?
So if the council member feels that he or she reviewed adequately the facts as they were presented and all the supporting documents, then they would be caught up on the findings of fact, and I would think that voting would be appropriate in that quasi-judicial manner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I think so it'd be good to note that obviously on that, so it's on the record that it was reviewed and things of that nature. So, very good. Okay, excellent. No, I appreciate that very much. Okay, I think we are all up to speed in where we are at, and so with that, as I mentioned, we did receive those two items. So, but if Mr. Jones, if you could just kind of go over those for council. Again, public testimony is closed, so no testimony taken from the public, but staff is always available for questions and things of that nature. So we'll begin with Alex and then open it up for questions from council for staff at that time.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Alex Jones, Associate Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard. Just give a quick review of these, especially since Councilmember McGee does not have this. We were told between 1,400 and 1,600 square foot homes will be about 16%. 44% will be between 1,600 and 2,000 square foot homes, and then 40% will be 2,000 plus square foot homes is what they average in their developments. And for the response letter from Pioneer Irrigation District, at this time, they are not interested in a crossing. Their main reasoning is that it makes it harder for their employees, and since there's not any established paved pathway on the other side of the canal, they would not be, let's see, find the wording here. They would not approve the pedestrian-only crossing at this location at this time. I stand for questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Are there any questions from council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Question on that. If they're not going to do the pathway, then is that development no longer meeting the requirements of the comprehensive plan?
Council members, the pathway will still be made. I believe is outside of the irrigation's easement. It's just the pathway connection over the canal will not be made.
So they won't be connecting the pathways, right?
Correct.
So the connecting pathways is part of the comprehensive plan?
It's part of the city code.
So they would not be conforming to that part of the city code?
On this area, it's not. Okay. All right. Council members, as discussed with the director, that it is not feasible at this time, and then once in the future it does become feasible, say the other development comes in and pays their pathway, a future connection could be made. It's just without the irrigation company's consent, there's nothing we can do at this time.
Okay. I just want clarification that in the code it says that they need to be connected. Is that correct?
They need to try to establish a connection, but if the irrigation company will not permit it, we can't.
And that's in the code?
Mayor and Councilmember Register, the code talks about public pathways, and it does talk about where feasible. In the Trails and Pathway Master Plan, it gives a map of some locations where pathways are encouraged or wanting to be done as development occurs. And so what we would typically do in this situation, since the irrigation district won't allow it, is we'll have them provide the public pathway to the portions that they can at this time, with the intent that in the future, whether that's the city making that final connection or future development making that final connection, that'll happen. And unfortunately, sometimes those connections just don't happen because we can't get buy-in from the other public agencies. And so that master plan is really just kind of a guide of what we'd like to see, but we don't always necessarily get it. Kind of like the comp plan is a guide.
So just kind of clarifying that, so what is being proposed does comply with code requirements, city code requirements?
Mayor and council, that is correct. What they're proposing does comply with the code.
So is it consistent with the city comprehensive plan if the pathways are not connected? Because I know when I sat on that committee, they were, at least my understanding was that the plan said that they all needed to be connected.
Mayor and council member Register, there's different pathways throughout the code that address connectivity. So you have your sidewalks that connect to other subdivisions. You have your pathways that connect through your subdivision to areas within the subdivision. And then you have public pathways that reference actually the pedestrian master plan. Mm-hmm. And in that master plan, it talks about infeasibility and even being able to decrease the width of those pathways. And so I believe, it's my professional opinion, that they're meeting the comprehensive plan as far as connectivity to other subdivisions. They're just not providing that connection along the irrigation canal, but they still have connectivity off of their frontages to other developments through sidewalks and pathways.
Okay, then my question for the mayor then is, do we remember why this question came up then? If it was, what was it about it?
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
good. So there is an approved development south of Ustick where Kimball interjoins. It's both commercial and residential. And during that approval, there was quite a bit of discussion on making sure that they continued our pathway system through that subdivision. So this next subdivision abuts it with the separation being Phyllis Canal. So the subdivision that was previously approved would have to make a connection like onto a street in the Cumberland, what is that, Cumberland subdivision? Yeah, somewhere in that area. Because normally we don't ask irrigation company to allow access. They typically just don't allow access. So this particular subdivision, if approved, could make a walking pathway that would connect to Laster, which would get people out onto 10th on a bike route, but I can understand where the Phyllis Canal would not, typically we don't ask for that, so.
Yeah, and there can always be conditions placed, like if the motion is for approval with conditions, there can always be conditions placed stating that the applicant in the future shall work with, the developer to the north to install a crossing if allowed by Pioneer Irrigation District. So that puts it where, again, if allowed, then they need to work with the property owner to the north to get that installed. So you can always add those conditions. So that way, if there is a possibility in the future, it's not lost today just because it's not there.
Right,
So.
right.
Mayor?
Yes.
Just wanted to note, Mayor and Council, if you remember, we did approve one like this not too long ago for Lavender Crossing. They had a very similar situation where they could not get approval to go across the canal. And so they put in the public pathway to, as far as they could, up to their, to the edge of that canal, to their property lines. But there is a condition in there that, in the future, when it's feasible, that connectivity could be made. Whether that's through a partnership with the city, or that the city does it, or however you want to do it, it could be put into funds for the street department to do that final connection across the pathway.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
So I just wanted to, in our previous hearing, there was quite a bit of discussion about the size of homes that were going into this subdivision. And if memory serves me right, the discussion was the homes were going to be like 2,000 square feet or bigger. They would be more upper end homes in that neighborhood. The indication is here is it would be quite a mix. Is that different than what we were discussing previously in your recollection?
Well, is she going to be able to address this, the applicant?
No,
They-
so
okay.
public testimony is closed. So
I
just
feel
the-
like
just staff.
at the previous meeting, they said it was gonna be closer to like 2,500 square feet homes. And remember, we were having the discussion about the garages, and I had mentioned that if it's 2-car garages, it's probably closer to 1,800. My concern with this email is that, this person who sent this to Trilogy Group, who said, this is what we tend to do, and if you would need to speak to him if they want to get more specific than that and what he is comfortable committing to, size and mix are at his discretion. So I don't see anything followed up from there where they may have asked for a commitment on something like that. So even if these numbers are correct, with 40% being over 2,000 square feet and then 44% being 1,600 to 2,000 square feet, we still don't have a commitment from him anywhere that I can see. This email says to ask him, and I don't see anything that says that they asked him.
Yeah, and I'll maybe just comment real quick, and our city attorney can line me out if she needs to on this. So, but it would be my recommendation on any, not just this, but any subdivision comes in, to not put restrictions on percentage of square foot homes of this size or that size. You're starting to get into very touchy subjects of fair housing laws, things like that. If you're starting to restrict or require certain size of homes, can become very,
Well, I think the issue with this is that he has another subdivision where I think he had given some information about square footage and then changed it afterwards. So I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, if we're going to approve a subdivision that doesn't already fit the area, and then we're saying, well, here's one consideration because they're going to be more upscale homes, and then he changes his mind afterwards, like, do we have anything to hold him to it, or we can't?
so, and again, our attorney can chime in. So it kind of depends on the application as well. So, if they're asking for something above and beyond what's allowed by code, if it's a rezone application, an annexation application, they want something that's not allowed today, in my opinion, and please correct me if you disagree, then that's a totally different story, because they want to upzone it or whatever it is, or increase density or ask for a variance. Then you have more, I think, flexibility of putting in, conditions and things like that, because they want something more than what's allowed by code today. So this one's a little unique because it is allowed by code. It's an R1 zone, so they're not asking for a rezone, they're not asking for an annexation, they're not asking for variances. They're simply asking for a preliminary plat that meets every code requirement in the city code. So that's kind of where that difference is between like a rezone. Because typically when you see these, it's a subdivision with a rezone, or a subdivision with an annexation. And so this one's a little unique because it is just a subdivision request.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I actually have a copy of the requirements here, which I was going to sort of bring up during council comments because I think it'll be too long to do right now, that I think we probably need to look at, because I believe that there's where it talks about how it preserves the natural, scenic, or historical features of applicable. I don't think that it preserves the scenic features of putting that particular subdivision in the middle of all, everything that we've discussed before with these homes. So there's that. But I think this is a conversation council needs to have about these codes, because the frustrating part of this mostly is that we are having these hearings and people are taking time out to come and testify, and we're listening to them, and we're basically trying to decide if we're gonna vote yes or no, and then we're being told, nope, you have to vote yes if it does this, so why are we here? Why are we here? Why are we going through the motions and having people come out and do testimonies and do all this kind of stuff if we're already required to vote yes? So that's probably gonna come up during the council comments on how we should fix that so that we're not running people through hoops. But as far as this particular, subdivision is concerned, I think that just for my own comments, I do not believe that it meets all the requirements under the fact that it does not preserve the scenic features in that neighborhood.
Okay. And that's probably from the comprehensive plan, I'm guessing, that document, rather than the city code.
It is, Taylor, do you know where that came from?
Are you citing 11?
Yes, 110203.
110203. Give me just a moment to pull it up.
Okay, so then that probably is
Under
in the city code.
preliminary plat hearings.
So that's under, I think, the subdivision ordinance section, of chapter 11, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, and that's a valid question, though. Some cities, if it's just a subdivision, it's an outright allowed use, so it doesn't go to council. Some cities it does still, like obviously in this case, so that's something that definitely would be good for discussion on council to see, you know, what the flavor is on that. Because I know in some cities, if you meet all the codes, then it doesn't go to a public hearing. It's just an allowed use, and it goes to the city engineer, planning and zoning director. They review it to see if it complies, and then it doesn't go to a public hearing like this on those. So, but no, those are good points and good items for discussion for future council. Taylor.
Mayor and Council and Councilwoman Register, so just so we're talking about all kind of on the same page, so again, quasi-judicial nature needs to be based on the facts and needs to be some sort of regulatory authority. So the comprehensive plan is not that. Our city code has regulatory authority, meaning it is more legal basis for making decisions, such as a quasi-judicial decision, right? And so comprehensive plan, there's case law to suggest that denying a preliminary plat based solely upon it not substantially complying or having some sort of kind of, I guess, difference in what the comprehensive plan requires is not a basis to deny a preliminary plat application solely based on the fact that that comprehensive plan is a guide, right? It's a structure that doesn't have regulatory authority such as the code does. Now, our city code does delineate exactly what needs to be considered before you decide on what a preliminary plat application, you know, should look like. And so complying with the comprehensive plan is one of those things. Being consistent with city code is another one of those things. There's a handful of different things that need to be considered. But again, those need to be based off of the facts as they were presented. And a comprehensive plan differential is not solely the primary decision that can lead to a denial of a preliminary plat application. Am I answering some of those questions, or at least kind of summarizing what we're all discussing?
Yes. Now, this thing that you had sent me that we had talked about, the preliminary plat hearings with the 1, 2, A, B, C, D, E, is this out of the comprehensive plan, or this is the city code?
So that city code, we're looking at 11-02-03, the review and hearing section of preliminary plat hearings. And so, again, I'm not ultra familiar with subsection E on that of natural, scenic, and historic features. That is something that I believe staff has considered and has recommended for approval based on their understanding of, you know, what the developer is proposing. But that is one of those things.
But if this is city code and the city code has merit, right, over the comprehensive plan or whatever we were talking about, then I'm still going to reference that E, because at a previous presentation from planning and zoning, the PowerPoint had said something about being in harmony with the surrounding neighborhoods, right, which I'm assuming is going to be under E for the natural, scenic, or historic features, that it's in harmony with that. I mean, outside of the historic part. And so I don't feel like the subdivision's in harmony with the neighborhood that it's with.
Are there any other questions for staff? Councilor McGee, do you have any questions at this time?
I don't right now. Mayor, I'm listening though. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so with that, I mean, there's still staff is still available for questions if you have that, but it'd be appropriate for discussion from the council, and any motions as well are appropriate.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Doty.
I just have a statement, and that is basically reiterating everything that's said here. They're in complete compliance with our codes as well as with our zoning laws, and according to the Fair Housing Act, denying them the subdivision may be in violation of the Fair Housing Act. You can't base your decision based on fear or what may occur, and so I just wanted to make sure I made that statement for the record.
Very good. Thank you so much. Any other discussion? Councilor
Mr.
Stoddard.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I did a little investigation into the surrounding area, and I always like to see new subdivisions that come into areas, you know, to make sure that they do represent themselves, to make sure that they fit into these areas. And legal might argue that point with me, whether that's a good way to look at it or not, but after all, we are elected by the taxpayers, and we're supposed to be looking out for them. But for instance, the Cumberland property that's east of here, of this preliminary plat or this particular subdivision, most of their lots are from a quarter of an acre to a third of an acre. Their home square footage is anywhere from 1,700 to 2,200 and more. And their final phase, those lots are selling for $120,000 to $150,000 right now. And the homes in that area, I haven't seen anything under $500,000 as far as resale. So again, we have to ask ourselves, this proposal that we're looking at, whether it matches what's there already. And if you look at the west side of this proposal, I mean, the lots or the property is even larger. And I would guess, and I didn't look at any of the sales prices on that side because I don't think anybody sold anything, but my guess is that it would be well above the $500,000 price tag just because of the size of the lots that they have. So again, does it fit is what I usually look at. So that's all I have.
No, excellent. Thank you so much. Any other comments or discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Allgood.
I'm struggling with this one a great deal because I agree with Councilor Stoddard and Councilor Register. But the fact of the matter is the applicant has met everything required by the city. And as Councilor Doty just read, we can't rule on something that possibly could happen or fears outside of that. So I'm very conflicted. I listened to the advice that you gave, and knowing your background, I'm guessing you're pretty knowledgeable on that kind of advice. So I'm like I said, I agree more with Councilor Stott and Councilor Register, but again, based on a number of things, I don't know how to proceed other than so this is what I'm going to do. Anyway, based on testimony and evidence and record in this matter and upon the findings of facts and conclusions of law, I move that SUB 23-9 for a preliminary plat for Prairie Creek subdivision be approved with the condition that the pathway as possible can be installed and the crossing made when feasible.
And then include all the other conditions stated in the staff report as well. I'm guessing correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that is a motion for approval of the request, and that would be with the conditions as outlined in the staff report and the additional condition that the applicant be required to extend the pathway across is it the Phyllis Canal? Is that correct? In the future, if available and approved through Pioneer Irrigation District. Does that sound?
That sounds correct, yes.
Very good. So that is the motion from Councilor Allgood. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
So we do have a second. So again, the motion is from Councilor Allgood and a second from Councilor Doty for approval of the request as was noted. So that would be time for council, any discussion on that motion. Councilor McGee, do you have any discussion on that motion?
I don't, Mayor. I understand the motion.
Okay, very good. Okay, then if there...
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes.
just want to add, and I can be brief, not only have they met all the code, but they have not asked for any variance.
Okay, very good. Any other discussion on that motion?
And,
Yeah.
I realize that you're all saying they've met the code, but I'm literally looking at the code that says the subdivision preserves natural, scenic, or historic features if applicable. So the fact that it is, so different than the surrounding areas and that word scenic, that's how I'm taking that. So in my opinion, they have not met the code. And I'm not quite sure what fear Counselor Doty's talking about, because I think it's a lot more brave to stand up for the right thing than it is to just make a vote because you're afraid of the code.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I might be able to shed some clarity on that code section. So that code section under the preliminary plat is actually to preserve historical or natural features on the site itself.
That's not what it says. So that's the conversation that I want to bring up later, because it says the subdivision preserves natural, scenic, or historical features. It doesn't have like where it says in reference to historical features that it preserves the natural or scenic. So these are the things that I think we need to be revisiting, is making sure that this is written so that there's no question about those things.
Sure, and Mayor and Councilmember Register, we can certainly clarify that section of the code through an amendment. Just a sideline to that, when staff is looking at compatibility of the surrounding area, we look at things like the transition of land uses, like residential estates next to single family is a compatible land use. We cannot look at square footage, we cannot look at even the design of the buildings or the size, because fair housing, and we have no design criteria in our code for houses.
Which is something else we probably need to revisit. But I guess my other question is when we make a motion and then there's conditions or whatever it is that they have to do, like, does anybody follow up on that? Because I know there's another subdivision where he had conditions and he's not doing them and nobody's following up on it. So is there, I guess, and again, that can come up later, but those are the kinds of concerns I have as a councilman and a resident, if the city's following up on the things that we're asking.
Sure, and Mayor and Councilmember Register, just to answer that, I don't know if those things were followed up on in the past. We have recently, within the last year, implemented provisions and processes within our department to make sure that those are getting followed up on.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any other discussion? Okay, so we do have a motion. Again, this is a motion for approval of the request with the conditions as outlined in that one additional condition as was noted. So with that, we will open the voting. So voting is now open for the council. It's working on opening itself. Okay. And all votes are cast, so voting is closed. And that motion does pass with 4 in favor, 2 against. So for those at home that maybe can't see the screen, so Councilor Stoddard and Councilor Register did vote in the negative on that. And the other 4 councilors, Councilor Doty, Councilor Williams, Councilor Algan, and Councilor McGee did vote in favor. So that does approve the request for the subdivision, Prairie Crossing, if I remember the name correctly. Prairie Creek, sorry, I got close. So Prairie Creek. So it does approve it as noted with the conditions and the one additional. So with that, I would stand for a motion to close this public hearing item.
So moved.
And a second? So we have a motion from Councilor Stoddard and a second from Councilor Register to close this public hearing item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. So that moves us into new business. So the first item under new business, action item number 1, is to consider the mayor's recommendation for the appointment of the Public Works Director. So as you are all aware, the current Public Works Director, Mr. Brent Orton, has turned in his resignation and will be leaving the city at the end of this month. And we wish him all the best in his future endeavors. And he's been a great asset to the city. Been here for many years on that. And after careful consideration, opportunity to sit down and interview Mr. McDonald along with Council President Doty and Shelley Boggy, our Human Resources Director. Very confident in presenting the name of Mr. Rob McDonald as our new Public Works Director. So Rob comes to us with an incredible resume, degree in engineering, a master's degree in structural engineering, if I remember correctly. On that has been worked in the private sector when he was an engineer in Arizona and for 6 years, and then moved up to Idaho to work for the city of Caldwell and as the assistant city engineer, and then promoted into the city engineer, and now again applying for or moving into the role as the Public Works Director. So I've had the chance to work with Rob in different aspects when I was the planner for the city, and it's always been a pleasure to work with him, and I appreciate his outlook when he looks at things. And I think him working in the private sector helps a lot with that, where he looks for opportunities and ways to make things work rather than putting up hurdles or roadblocks. Looking at archaic requirements or things like that. Is it really necessary to meet the ends of the need for the city and the developer? And so he's always had a great rapport with the development community, with other engineering firms in the valley, and just have a great deal of respect for him, for the person he is and the way that he conducts himself both at the office and away. So it is my pleasure to present him to the council for that appointment. And Mr. McDonald, maybe if you don't mind, we'll put you on the spot to come up to the microphone and just say maybe a few words, and then we'll present that to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am truly humbled and appreciate the opportunity for the nomination to fill this position. I feel like I don't normally speak about myself. I do feel like I'm qualified, and it will be my goal to do everything I can to successfully manage and oversee the public works of the city, the water, the sewer, the transportation system. Those are all very important to me, and I want to see the city continue to grow and in an organized and orderly fashion, and I want the city to be successful.
Oh, very good. I'm excited to see the changes, because change is always a good thing. It opens up new opportunities, new vision, and I have no doubt that Mr. McDonald will implement many new changes going forward and improvements to the system. And not to inflate his ego any, but I did receive letters from current staff that he oversees in full support of him and commendation to him and the great leader that he was for them. And so that's always great to receive from the current staff that he oversees, to how much they admire him and appreciate his leadership. So those were well received, and appreciate that. Any questions from council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, Councilor Allgood, and then we'll jump on to you, Councilor McGee.
Okay, I was just curious.
Thank you.
In this appointment, how long is he being appointed for? What's the date?
So it is through the same term that Mr. Orton had. I believe it is 2025. If I remember right, is that right? Yeah. So yeah, because we kind of based off this last one though, so it basically fills the same term that Mr. Orton had.
Okay. Mr. McGee, you can go ahead if you want.
Yeah,
I'm just curious about that.
Councilor McGee?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I too don't want to overinflate Mr. McDonald's ego, but I do feel like I need to add just something very quickly. Rob's got my full support, and I'll be voting yes. Rob and I have had an opportunity to sit on the Heritage Charter School board for several years now, and he is the chairman and me as the vice chairman, and I've seen Rob's leadership skills in action in an arena, in an area other than just in his job as a city employee. He's led that school through some pretty difficult circumstances, including COVID and the death of a principal, and it was really Rob's leadership throughout that helped that little school make it through and continue to successfully educate a lot of Caldwell's young people. And so I don't question for a moment Rob's commitment to this community, and I think with the additional responsibilities, Rob will do a great job. And so I wholeheartedly support your nomination, Mayor.
Good. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Any other comments or any?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I had a conversation with Rob last night during the budget meeting, and gave him some expectations that I had, and I really feel that he's gonna meet those expectations. There's some issues I think that we really need to, spend some time on, and he assured me that those would be covered. The only negative thing I've got on him is, he makes us look bad with his attire tonight compared to some of us. So, anyway, he has my full support also. Thank you.
If it makes you feel better, he doesn't wear a suit often, so it's one of the few times I've seen him in one. So I have a feeling he won't be in one next council meeting, so.
My wife told me if this goes through, that I need to step my game up a little bit, so.
Maybe not too much, it sounds like, so Daley, so, very good, excellent. So, with all that, do we have a motion to accept this, nomination?
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Councilor Doty and a second from Councilor Stoddard to, accept the recommendation of appointment of Rob McDonald as the Public Works Director for the City of Caldwell. And we have the voting open, so we'll open that for all council members to cast their votes. And all votes are cast, and so voting is closed, and that passes unanimously. So congratulations, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you.
So we are going to swear in Mr. McDonald tonight. His wonderful family is here tonight. His 5 beautiful daughters. I don't know how he does it with 5 girls. I have 3 boys, and that's hard enough, but he does it. And his wonderful wife, Daley. So do you mind introducing them, and then
Sure.
if they'd like to come forward for the swearing in?
Come on up. So my wife, Daley, is there on the left. And then we'll go from oldest to youngest. Simi is in the middle, about to go to college, and then Venice, and then Marin, Robin, and Summer.
And Simi, where are you headed here in a couple of days? Idaho. So she's headed off to college. So
Oh, wow.
Rob's an old man. He's got kids going to college.
He does not look old.
No, I was thinking the same thing, yeah.
Okay, Mr. McDonald, you'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Rob McDonald, solemnly swear
I, Rob McDonald, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support
the Constitution of the State of Idaho,
the Constitution of the state
the laws and ordinances of the City of Caldwell,
and the laws and ordinances of the city of Caldwell,
that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will
as Public Works Director
the duties of public works director
of the City of Caldwell, Canyon County, Idaho,
of the city of Caldwell, Canyon County, Idaho,
best of my ability
to the best of my ability.
during my continuance therein.
Chuck's gonna keep that list. Congratulations.
You have a list?
As long as Chuck's on it.
And I want a pen.
Say the good Lord gave my brother-in-law 5 daughters as well, because he's one of the most patient men I know, and he knows I'm not that patient, so he gave me 3 boys. So it does say a lot for that. I know it takes a lot of patience to raise girls more than boys. So, but Rob demonstrates that quite well. So appreciate that, and again, very excited. So here comes the future, ready or not. So, okay, that moves us on now to new business item number 2. This is a legislative matter for receiving comments concerning the, oh wait, that one has been removed. Never mind. So we're going to go on to number 3, public hearing for increases in sewer and water fees over 5% of that previously charged. And are you doing this, Ashley, or is Mr. Orton? We can, yes. You have 5 minutes.
Or less.
Or less.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for hearing this item tonight. There is a public hearing required, of course, when a fee is increased more than 5% over that previously charged. And there are two elements in sewer and water that are being proposed for increases above 5% to take effect in October, on October 1st with the new fiscal year. Those are subject to a public hearing. For water, it is an increase in the connection fees, and that's a significant increase. As we discussed in the budget workshops, there's the master planning effort that we've engaged in has illustrated that we really need to take a serious increase in those to be able to bear the burdens that are before the water fund going forward. So it's also important that when we bring in new growth that it's paying its own way and that the users of the system aren't subsidizing the cost of the capital cost associated with bringing people into the system. So that's the first change. And then in sewer, there are some fee modifications that in a more minor nature that are over 5% as well. So there is an opportunity for the public to speak, and Mayor, it would be appropriate for me to now yield the floor to you to hold the public hearing, and then I do have further information to share with the City Council about these fees prior to their consideration for adoption.
Okay, very good. So we did not have any sign-up sheets because it is a legislative matter in that regard, so we would just ask if there is anyone out of the multiple people in the audience, if there's any of them that would like to. Did Dave just raise his hand? Does that mean he wants to come and speak on it? But if there is anyone that does want to speak on it, they're more than welcome to come forward, and it does not appear that there are. So,
with that, Mr. Mayor, then I'd just like to give the council a little bit of background on a couple of things that are important. There's a little bit of a unique nuance with the water fees, not associated with the increase over 5%. We have worked, last year we made several changes to the water fees that I think are very good and should be helpful to encourage, one, cover the cost of the city when the water team goes out to shut off and reconnect services because of delinquency. Two, to help encourage against delinquency. One of those changes that you enacted last year was to require an account holder to bring their account current, basically to a zero balance, before they would be reconnected. And that seems stern, but at the same time, what it does is it helps the water users to avoid these cycles of repetitive, being on the shutoff list month after month repetitively because they're paying just enough to get off the shutoff list, but they're still delinquent. So it obliterated those allowances for a negative account balance to persist for months on end. It did create a challenge, though, that we discovered, and that is we have a number of wonderful help agencies in Caldwell who assist people who are down on their luck. And one thing those help agencies, when they help someone, which generally speaking, they'll help someone once in a year. When they help someone who's down on their luck with their water bill for a month, they don't want those usually donated and hard to come by help funds to pay towards fines and fees, or fines and penalties rather. They want it to pay for water. So the policy before you, and this is, you'll find this on page 171 of your packet. The policy before you would actually make effective immediately upon passage a policy change that is currently a policy promulgated by the Public Works Department. The City Code allows us to make policies of an interim nature. This would make it a more solid and appropriate policy by having the City Council's approval and passage of it as their own policy. This would allow the city, when working with the help agency, to waive fines and penalties once in a rolling 12-month period for an account. And that allows us to work with these help agencies in a way that doesn't make them feel defeated because they don't get donations to assist people who are in trouble, and then it gets gobbled up by paying fines and penalties. So that's an important note. That would become effective today, while the fees would wait to become effective until October 1st in alignment with the new fiscal year. So any questions on that one with the water?
You're good. Any questions from council? Councilor Stoddard?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Orton, some of the questions that have come up relative to not grandfather rights, but people that have been paying all along for their water and they're all up to date, and our growth should pay for itself, quote unquote. And some of the arguments that have come up in phone calls I've got is, why should the existing water users pay the higher prices that's the responsibility of those folks who are moving into the area. They should be paying the higher price, so what do we tell them?
That's a great question. So the answer to that is that the efforts of the intention of the fees is to do exactly that. There are increases in costs, and it costs more and more, of course, to operate the system. In fact, some of the discoveries in this, there are a number of things that we need to catch up on that we're not doing because we have been undermanned. So if we were to become fully staffed, there's costs associated with that. And so those costs, the cost of the running, operation, and maintenance, are a cost that belong to all of us as water users in concert. The costs associated with new growth should be borne by new growth, and that is intended to be covered by the cost of connection fees. So the stated intent of the connection fees, as defined by the Idaho Supreme Court, they had a lawsuit between the North Idaho Building Contractors Association and the city. They essentially lined out that the purpose of those connection fees is for development to pay for their share of the system. It's basically a buy-in fee. They use an analogy of a country club. Like if you become a member of the country club, you're literally buying a share in that country club, and you're a part owner. And so the intent is that when someone connects to the city's system, they are buying their little tiny slice, 1 out of 22,000 account holders. They're buying their tiny slice of the system. And so that is intended to be covered by those connection fees. It can always be improved, retooled, made better. There's always analysis that's appropriate to keep that properly up to date. Because of your actions in creating a deputy public works director position and getting a better public works director, I think you're going to find that those things will be attainable, right? You'll be able to get your hands on more analysis and more in-depth look at those kind of things that'll allow us to feel confident that we're really slicing that line just the way you described.
Councilor McGee, did you have a question?
No, I just had a comment, Mr. Mayor. What Brent was talking about, Mr. Orton was talking about just a few minutes ago, actually, the genesis of that was a constituent who contacted me and pointed out kind of the unfairness of the code that we had passed a few months ago in dealing with some of those water fees. And I just want to compliment Brent and his staff in finding and this won't surprise anybody that Brent was able to do this, but they were able to find a fair and equitable solution to letting these agencies help people who were having trouble paying for their water, and using those fees just to keep that water on. So, in other words, these charities, a lot of them are religious organizations, were paying so that people could continue their water service, and they were being penalized for it. I brought it to Brent, and again, it won't surprise anybody that Brent came up with a fair and action, and I think that's what we do in Caldwell, and I'm just very complimentary to Brent and his team for coming up with something that I think is fair to the people of Caldwell.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Councilor Doty, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So, Brent, is this just only if they get a charitable donation, or would this be every citizen gets one reprieve, so to speak, from their late fees? Let's say they're able to collect it from relatives and not from a charitable organization. We don't really have a vetting process as to who and how they got the money and where they got it from, but some of those folks try just as hard. They just don't get it from a charitable organization. Maybe someone else loans them the money. So was any thought given to that maybe it doesn't come from a church or a support group of some sort?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Doty, I think that's a good point. It does not, as written, it does not consider that. It considers, there are a number, though, of opportunities that are offered to everyone, including that we offer, we'll work with someone, and it's written into the policy, who approaches the city and says, hey, I'm struggling, I need extra time to pay my bill. If someone communicates with us, then we have written into the policy an opportunity that staff can take advantage to assist them for a period of time. Of course, there's a limit on it, but this does not contemplate someone who says, hey, I'm my own help agency, and frankly, that's a good thing, right? If someone's drawing on their own resources, that's a step in the direction of self-reliance. And it's really it's a goal that we have. I mean, it's part of the reason for these penalties to help people grow towards a self-reliant status. And these help agencies are in the same boat. They're trying to help people towards a self-reliant state where they can take care of themselves. That's why this is eligible only once in a 12-month rolling period. That is something that we could add if you'd like to see that done, that any customer is eligible to have fines and penalties waived once in a 12-month rolling period. It would be easy to do that if you would like it to include that. But we really wanted to make sure for these help agencies that we didn't defeat their efforts.
True, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. We don't want people just to get away from the fees either. However, we also don't want to now encumber those. I think you mentioned churches, so I'll just say churches, or I know there's other organizations, and now everybody also knows that's the loophole out as you go to one of those to do it. And so I guess I'm just looking for discussion whether everyone should get it, or who decides who gets it. If I come in and say the right words, I get it, but if you don't say the right words, you don't get it. And so I just don't know if it needs to be even more clear, or just, that's all.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good point. The way that it's constructed, it's not something that we would anticipate. Obviously, it's not hidden. It's being talked about in a public meeting here, and it's available on YouTube. That said, we don't have the expectation that people who may be habitually struggling, and or going from one to the other of 5 different help organizations, some of which are religiously based and some of which aren't. The city of Caldwell has its own help organization called Caldwell Cares. Another part of this policy would allow us to deposit some of the fee and fine, or the penalty and fine related money at the discretion of the Public Works Director and Finance Director into the Caldwell Cares Fund to help us help people. We contract the administration of that out to the Salvation Army at this point in time, but and we do pay them an administration fee for doing that. But we have our own help organization as well that would be the possible recipient of some of those penalties and fines. So back to your point about the citizens, though, without escaping from talking about that, we're sure happy to do that, to craft some additional language to make sure that would be available to someone who does creates their own help. That's honorable. That's, so.
Right.
Yes, Councilor Doty.
I'm not sure it needs to be recrafted, just as long as we keep an eye on it, and if something like that were to occur, maybe we come back again. Hopefully, it sounds like based on your experience, that doesn't occur, that people know that's already a way to accomplish that. So I'm confident with the way you have it, as long as we just make sure we monitor it in case it needs another change in the future.
Yeah, and I was actually going to say that perhaps, 6 months from now, we make sure that we revisit this. I see Ashley right back there taking studious notes, and Mr. McDonald, that perhaps in 6 months, we look at it and see how has it been working. Is it working good? Do we need to make another change on it to make it where it's not being taken advantage like that, those loopholes? So could be just a fair note to look at that, for sure.
I think, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Doty, I think that's a great idea. And it is something you have, via the city code, you have given authority to the Public Works Director to create interim policies. So a policy could be created to do just that in the interim until it can be brought before the council for if it appears that there's, something that needs retool along those lines.
Fair enough.
With that, let's see, we omitted to talk about sanitation because of an awesome discussion by the department heads under Public Works at the budget workshop. I'll just point out in brief, the council is familiar with what is proposed for sanitation because it was recently discussed when the council adopted a new contract with Republic Services. So to note, the operative things are, number one, that a new fee will become effective October 1st. It's based on the contract's limitation of 4.95% maximum increase. The consumer price index from March to March for this year exceeded that, and so that limitation came to bear to benefit the citizens this year again. And then April 1st, 2024, an alteration of that fee schedule, which is included, so you're adopting both of these right now, would enact the second portion of that contract, which implements recycling as an included service for everyone. And so the fee schedule that's appropriate to that is adopted here, but effective April 1st of 2024, which gives Republic Services the time to fully deploy to everyone in the city who desires recycling service. And it is included for everyone. So everyone's paying for that service. They can decline it. It just doesn't change their fees. And then those who receive their cards, someone actually could start using that service before the fees change, but it will become effective for all April 1st of 2024 based on that contract.
And I know part of that, there was going to be like a fee holiday. Is that the right way to put that? When, I'm trying to remember, has there been a designated time period for that? So real quick, just to jog everybody's memory, that is because fees are going to be going up. So the proposal was to use some of the fund balance, which was a little excessive in there, as like a fee holiday where every customer doesn't pay for like 1 or 2 months. Can't remember what it was, to help offset those increases. Do we know when that, have you figured out what day or when that would be appropriate to have that?
The plan is to roll that out in October or November of 2023.
Perfect. Give me more money to spend for Christmas present for my wife. So.
For those that are thinking ahead, right?
That's right, yeah.
I'm like a 18th of December type of shopper. Other fees, the council, if you'd like to discuss the other fees, happy to do that. If there are any questions, there's a summary at the beginning of the item. Street lights, 3% increase, and you can see what it does to the average user as well with those. We have also compared ourselves to neighboring cities. We are the second lowest water rates in the valley. Meridian actually is lower than us as of last reading. Now, the thing to know is that they're going to change their fees probably coming in for October 1st, and that information is not available until they generate it. So I think we're in a good place that way, and I do appreciate that the council has, while it is important to know where we stand in the rest of the world, it's a good gut check. I do appreciate that the council has been willing to look at what are the actual costs for us to operate the system and setting fees accordingly. So that's, we failed to do that many years ago. In fact, Councilman Stoddard was in the budget workshop when I rolled out that we're in trouble if we don't make a 13% increase in water fees. That was, I think, 2016 or something. So it's not nice to do that, and it's really not appropriate for us to be that far behind. So even when we did that, we were still the lowest in the valley, I'll just point out, and practically in the state.
So one thing, just maybe kind of wrap it up for discussion on the council, because I know this did come up in the budget workshop, and just to get any feedback from the council on it is regards to airport fees, specifically the monthly tie-down rental. I know that this was brought up on that, and my recommendation was to leave it where it is, because I know council had just raised it. It was mentioned during the budget workshop, is that an appropriate fee? And so maybe just if there's any thoughts or discussion on that. So it was increased last year to $75 a month. It is one of the higher fees, but I know we had a lot of derelict airplanes out there, kind of issues like that. So that was kind of the reason to increase that to that amount. I don't fly, so I don't pay those fees, but I have my thoughts on it, that it doesn't seem like too exorbitant of a fee, but I know some people do think that, and so thought it might be good if there's any discussion from any council on their feelings, if they still feel that's appropriate or not. So
I have a comment.
Yes.
So of course we were talking about takeoff and landing fees, and I believe some of that input came back from the pilots as their recommendation. Right? They had input on what fees they wanted raised. So I'm in support of keeping it at $75 because that was some of their negotiation to prevent other fees from being charged. So I believe that's how we got to the $75, was based on their recommendation. So
yeah, very good. Yeah, no, and I said I do agree with that. And I think it kind of goes into like some of the discussion we had yesterday too about wages, right? We got to make sure we compare everything. So maybe our tie down fees are a little more than the others, but maybe they're charging some pretty high takeoff and landing fees, which we don't charge anything on that. So you do have to look at that whole picture. So no, I appreciate that comment.
And Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind me commenting on that, the way that the resolution is before you, it maintains the fee at $75. But we're of course ready if the council, it sounds like the council's disposition is they'd like to keep it there. But if we're at the council's desire, I think the fee that we were recommending as an alternative would be $45. We have, of course, heard some grousing from some folks who probably didn't turn up when the fees were being discussed before, and doggone it, you know what I mean? But,
My recommendation is we keep them at 75 since that's what they recommended.
and then one other thing I'd point out on the airport fees is that the fees, as proposed, are in alignment with the funding plan that we presented to you last year.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Any other questions from council for any of these?
One
Yes,
quick
Councilor
question.
Ogden.
I'm looking at your water connection fees. So I understand it, when a residential, just a regular home, these homes are being built in a subdivision, what is the standard connection? Is that the base 3/4 by 3/4 connection? So all these new homes coming in, that's the connection fee?
Yeah, so typically there are multiple elements to both sewer and water connection fees that represent the individual parts. So for instance, well capacity fee, that fee's going from $571 to $856.66. So someone who's connecting, I'm just going to tally up the fees here. They would pay the well development fee. They would pay.
Everybody pays well development fee?
Everyone pays well development fee, and then they would pay the appropriate meter fee, and usually domestic meters are 3/4 inch, just as you pointed out. So that would put them at a total of, I'm pushing the wrong button. No, it's not telling. There we go. That'd put somebody at $2601.35 for their water connection fees, unless I've omitted something. I don't think I have. Oh, mainline extension fee. I did omit that. And mainline extension fee is not paid by someone who's put in mainline. So if someone participated in a local improvement district to get a mainline extended, or they're in a subdivision that extended the mainline, then that work has been done, so they don't pay the fee. Someone who's connecting to a mainline that we just built at at the water user's expense, the water fund's expense, they're going to pay that mainline extension fee. So that would bring them to a total of $2,641.75 would be their new connection fee. And it's presently like $1,700.
And then they would have sewer on top of that?
Yep, sewer connection fees separate from that, yep. And those are changing, but only at the rate of 4.9%.
And this fee you quoted, that's the new fee or what they're paying currently?
The one I just mentioned to you, the $2641.75 is the new fee. That's what the new fees as proposed.
So maybe just kind of make sure I'm on track on that. So if building a new home, getting a new connection, your connection fees are also being proposed to go up 50%. Is that correct?
The connection fees are going up 50%. The user fees are not. So someone who's a user, their fees are proposed to increase 4.9%.
Oh, okay. Very good. So that kind of goes back, I think, to what Councilor Stoddard was talking about, making sure new growth pays for new growth, upping that, because that's the new growth, more or less, but the people that are already there, they're just a 4.9% increase.
Yes. And Mr. Mayor, do you mind, one important note for the council to have on tap as well with the sewer connection fees. And doggone it, I'm past my 5 minutes.
Long time ago. So we don't even want to go there. So.
Councilman Doty's giving me the overtime sign. I recognize that. Really well. Just kidding. So, something important to know about the sewer connection fees, sewer use fees. There is basically only a 4.9 or 5% increase happening in the sewer use fees in net. But what's changing is we have charged, during the entire time I've been employed with the city of Caldwell, we've charged a capital improvement surcharge. And that capital improvement surcharge meant that 60%, you basically compute the fee and then multiply that by 1.6. So an additional 60%, and that portion of it went into the capital improvement fund. With the way that the Idaho Supreme Court basically redefined the meaning of this, which isn't too far off what we would understand, but it was common for jurisdictions to calculate what does it cost for the capital improvements, and that was kind of how they sourced their fee. Well, no, it's got to be equal to the cost of them buying their piece of the system. That fee, I think, was originally proposed to be sunset after some number of years. What happened by the time I took employment with the city of Caldwell, that had really just relegated down to where our fee was equivalent to everyone else's fees, or close, neck and neck with other fees. And that was no longer a surcharge. It was just, we let our fee grow into that. So this year, that fee is demised. And instead, the other fees are all raised appropriately to make up for that. And it keeps you competitive with the other cities still in terms of your user fees, but it eliminates that capital improvement surcharge. What that will mean is that that money will revenue into the sewer fund, maintenance and operations fund. We do a lot of work out of both funds, and because of that change by the Idaho Supreme Court, we will probably be sunsetting a capital fund for the treatment plant, pending, Raylan and I've talked about that somewhat. And so that's something that could also happen. It just is less relevant with the way that the case law modifies that. So that's an important note, that capital improvement surcharge is now gone, and you're just paying a base fee and your use fee as a user.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Okay, very good. So then, see, this is number 3, correct? So this is, so we just need to close this hearing, then move into number 4. So we have a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved.
And a second. Motion from Councilor Doty, second from Councilor Stoddard to close this public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. So that moves us into action item number 4, consider the resolution adopting Public Works and Engineering Department fees and policies. I don't have to read this, correct? Okay, good. Okay, very good. So with that, I stand for a motion for approval of this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilor Doty and a second from Councilor Stoddard to approve the resolution, which does adopt the fees as presented for the Public Works and Engineering Department. Is there any discussion on that motion? Then voting is open. And all votes have been cast, and voting is closed, and that motion passes unanimously. That moves us into action item number 5, and this is just to accept the notice of a public hearing to be held on Tuesday, August 1st, 2023 at 6 p.m. to consider proposed fee changes to the impact fees for Parks Department, Caldwell Fire Department, and the Caldwell Police Department.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Doty, second from Councilor Stoddard, to accept that notice. Any discussion? Okay, with that, then voting is open on that item. Actually, it's not, so we'll just do a voice vote on this one.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to get ahead of you. So we're going to just voice vote on this. So again, the motion is to approve the notice for this public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Okay, now we're on to action item number 6, which is bill number 37, ordinance number 3521, amending Caldwell Code pertaining to special event permits, liability insurance. Mrs. Geyer.
Mr.
Your
Mayor,
husband left. He didn't stick around for you? Man, we have to have a talk with that guy.
This ordinance that you have before you tonight is really just a cleanup issue, kind of a housekeeping situation. We realized that when the special event permits were moved from Chapter 10, which is the Planning and Zoning Ordinance, under to Chapter number 6, which is now orchestrated and enforced through the City Clerk's office, there was an elimination of a real critical element, and that had to deal with liability insurance. And so this just puts this back in the code, because if we have organizers of events that are doing especially large events requiring a special use or a special event permit, we want to make sure that we have current liability coverage for those events. And so this just spells out the provision for that, and that is what that's all about. If there are any questions, I'd be more than glad.
Very good.
to
Any
answer them.
questions for Mrs. Geyer? Okay, very
All right,
good.
thank you.
you so much. Appreciate that. So, I don't think that there's really anybody signed up. Do we have a sign-in sheet? Okay, so that's the thing. Okay. So I read this by title only and ask for a sponsor of this bill and ordinance. So this is ordinance number 3521, bill number 37, an ordinance enacted by the Caldwell City Council amending Chapter 6, Article 23, Section 623.1, pertaining to special event permits, providing for an effective date, providing for severability, and repealing all ordinances, resolutions, orders, and parts thereof in conflict herewith. Do we have a sponsor of this bill and ordinance?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Allgood.
I'll sponsor bill number 37, ordinance number 3521 and move for its passage.
Very good. Do we have a second?
Second.
So a motion from Counselor Elgin, a second from Counselor Williams for sponsorship and passage of Bill number 37, ordinance number 3521 for passage by title only and approve the summary for publication. Any discussion? With that, the voting is open. And Counselor McGee, yours has not showed up yet as being recorded.
Yeah, Mayor, I am pressing the button.
There it is. Okay, now it's there.
Literally.
So.
Thank you, Mayor.
You betcha. That motion passes unanimously. Okay, and that moves us into action item number 7. Consider resolution approving the request for a reallocation of ARPA funds from infrastructure improvements to economic development for purchase of a city-owned vehicle in the amount of $34,913. Ray Lynn.
So Steve wishes he could be here, but he was on vacation.
Does he really?
so-
He's in Yellowstone. I'd much rather be there than here. So.
I'm I'm just exaggerating. So, I've been working with Steven to, they really need a vehicle, and we've been looking at different funding sources, and so ARPA was one of those ones that we looked at, and we went through some informal bidding to select a vehicle. We selected the Honda, or the RAV4, because that ended up being the cheapest one. So we were looking for approval to use the ARPA funds for the vehicle. I will tell you that ARPA has been fully allocated after you approve the next resolution. All of the projects have been approved, I believe. Actually, there's one more probably. They'll come forward, but then all of the projects will be approved, so.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Any questions from council for Ray Lynn?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Elgin.
I think I asked the same question a lot, but I always get concerned whether the money we're spending meets ARPA criteria. And a vehicle for economic development, I mean, that concerns me. Convinced me that I shouldn't be concerned, I guess.
So right now, economic development is driving their own vehicles. So when they do site visits, they are really using their own personal vehicles to drive around businesses to visit Caldwell. And so it's really important to have a City of Caldwell vehicle to be able to do that with, instead of just using their personal vehicles. Steve has a lot of kids, and so, sometimes, the backseat's filled with toys.
No, I'm not arguing the fact that they need it. I had a conversation with the mayor. They have, about that. They absolutely need it.
Yes.
My concern is paying for it with ARPA funds.
So Rochelle and I review every single ARPA application. We make sure that it is eligible for ARPA funding. We make sure that it is, that we go through the correct purchasing requirements, and that it is one of those things that we would not put it before the council if it did not meet those eligible requirements. ARPA has this revenue replacement portion of it, which 10 million of the amount that we received can be used for general government expenditures. So this amount would come from that general government expenditure line item. So.
Right. I just don't want to be wearing an orange jumpsuit or anything like that.
Neither do I. Neither do I.
Especially where you might recognize a few of the people.
Yeah,
You just may have put some of those, but they're still in there.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions for Ray Lynn? Okay, very good. Okay, so then we do have this resolution before you for that approval. Do we have a motion for that approval?
So moved.
We have a motion from Councilor Stoddard and a second from Councilor Register for approval of the resolution for this reallocation of ARPA funds. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, if not, then the voting is open. And all votes are cast. Voting is closed, and that does pass unanimously.
Thanks for being awake this time, Mr. McGee.
Mr. Williams and Mr. Mayor, I did press the yes vote several times on the last vote. It just didn't register, so I apologize.
Very good. Well, I'm glad you recognized the voice and didn't think it was me saying that. You knew that it was Councilor Williams. So.
Oh, I knew who it was, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, that moves us into action item number 8. Consider resolution approving the request for reallocation of all remaining ARPA funds in the 2022 ARPA Grant Award Cybersecurity Fiber Extension Project to the Purple Sage Water Mainline Extension in the amount of $2,643,000 $2,643,176. Ashley, I see you coming forward. Are you going to present on this one?
Yes, just ever so shortly. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we are asking for the remaining funds. We recognize some of them have been allocated to different projects since the original allocation, but we're asking for the remaining funds that are currently in the ARPA cybersecurity fiber extension project to be allocated in their entirety to the Purple Sage water main extension. We have nearly exhausted all of the funds for that project, and it is currently under construction right now. One of the milestone goals for that project is to connect Caldwell Housing Authority to city water to make sure that they're getting a reliable and safe supply. So we've made that commitment, as well as the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality is also looking to the city to assist them with that supply. So in response to that, we will probably have to look for additional funds to get the project done all the way, but this will get us closer to where we need to be to finish construction.
Very good. Thank you so much. Any questions for Ashley? Okay, and they're taking it easy on you. With that, do we have any discussion or any motions for considering this resolution for the reallocation of these ARPA funds?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Doty.
I recommend that we consider the resolution approving the request for reallocation of all remaining ARPA funds in the 2022 ARPA Fund Grant Award.
Very good. Do we have a second?
Second.
So a motion from Councilor Doty and a second from Councilor Allgood for approval of this resolution for this reallocation of these funds. Any discussion on that motion? Voting is open.
Push harder, Councilor McGee.
And yes, there we go. Voting is closed. All votes have been cast, and that passes unanimously.
Mayor, I also recognized that voice as well. So I'm,
you notice everybody to
I'm
my
doing
left?
my best.
So,
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So that action or action item number 9 has been removed. So that moves us into action.
Can I ask a question about that real quick?
Yeah.
So on that one, on number 9, was that the city trying to get part of Brothers Park or give it away?
So that is, you can blame me for that one. So Brothers Park, so this would actually be the portion of Sisters Park, if I'm not mistaken. So it already is city, but it's city owned, but it's in the county. So we need to annex it into the city limits to be contiguous with all the others. So it needs to be city. We own it by that. So, the comp plan map showed it as R3, so that's how we went forward. I noticed that the Brothers Park is all R1. And so my recommendation was that it really should come forward as an R1. That more typically is our public space, our parks are zoned R1. R3, as you know, is high density. Thought that could scare people, like, well, what's the city looking at doing? Or they wanted to put in more apartments. So
that's what I was looking at. I was trying to make sure that we were not giving away a portion of Brothers Park to put apartment buildings on there.
So yeah, withdraw on that. It'll come back with an R1 zone. So, but staying in city, it'll be city owned, city annexed property. So.
Thank you.
Then we can start taxing ourselves for it. Maybe not, but yeah. So that will come back forward, but it'll be with an R1 zoning request rather than the R3. Okay, and number 10, action item for consider acceptance of the finance report.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Register.
I move that accounts payable in the amount of $2,598,379.26, represented by check numbers 170870 through 171146, and payroll for the amount of $660,837.80, represented by check numbers 38745 through 38825, and direct deposits to be accepted, payments approved, and vouchers filed in the office of the city clerk.
Do we have a second? Second. So we have a motion from Councilor Register and a second from Councilor Williams for consideration of the acceptance of the finance report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion passes unanimously. And that moves us into council reports. Councilor Register.
feel like I'm gonna sneeze, so I'm trying. I was
Where's
gonna-
the sun? That always
Yeah,
helps
I
me.
know. So, I'm gonna get on my soapbox for just a minute, but first I wanted to, just say on record again about, our budget, meetings that we had, in case the people that weren't watching, how well I think that went, and what a great job I think the finance department did putting all that together. And, again, to the council for asking questions and being so aware of everything that was coming in and making sure that we're good stewards of the money. I thought it went very well, and so I just wanted to point that out. But I also wanted to just go on record that we did get the, I don't know what we're calling it, the list that we had been asking for, planning and zoning put it together, about the building that's coming into the city. And the approved projects or projects that were in some way in progress, no matter where they were in that progress, that they had found that there were 9,770 doors coming to Caldwell, which kind of broke down to 61 developments. And then out of those 9,770 doors, 2,371 of those doors are multifamily doors, basically, in buildings. And then taking that sort of average, we can expect to increase our population by something like 30,000 people or so in the next 3-4 years, however long these take to build. And I think that it begs us to start looking again at our planning, to make sure that we're going to be prepared for this, to make sure that our infrastructure is going to be ready for this. And I'm still concerned that we're not ready for it. And when we were voting on the subdivision tonight, I feel like we failed. And part of that is because in 4 years from now, whether we're on council still or not, it's going to be all our fault that we have subdivisions like that just put in every infill in the city because they meet the code, so we just have to do it. So I would ask the council at some point that we need to be looking over that, because I feel like I've heard enough concerns about some of the subdivisions, especially tonight, where there is a concern, but there's a force to vote one way because we don't have a way out in the code, or we don't have the authority to do that. And I certainly don't want to encourage these hearings to end where we don't see the projects, but I do feel like we need to be able to have a little bit more authority about something like that, something for that, and not be fearful of the code or feeling pressure for that. And then also to look at what we do require as far as design, if we can, our accountability, if we have any kind of planning for the city at all, or if we're just going to continue to just sort of pop things in wherever and we're not trying to organize it in any way. And then, so anyway, so that was kind of with that, because what we did tonight with that is we took a subdivision that doesn't fit in an area, and we've now very likely brought down home values in the neighborhood. And these are people that already live here and people that we're supposed to be taking care of, whether they're county residents or city residents. And to me, I feel like it's a failure, and part of that is because I feel like we need to revisit the code and our authority. But also, I hope that we can come up with some kind of plan for the 30,000 some residents that we have coming, as far as our public safety, our infrastructure, all that kind of thing, before we continue to keep putting more in. So I don't know what the answer is to that. I'm not necessarily suggesting a moratorium, unless that's the only way to get organized and figure out what we're doing before it's too late. Because I think that's why we're in the position we're in right now. So that was it.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Councilor Stoddard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to dovetail a little bit of one Councilor Register had said, because, throughout our budget meetings, especially when it comes to public works and everything, we are way behind. Back in my first tenure with the city, I questioned Mr. Orton and some of the other folks about, sidewalks that haven't been built yet in 40, 50 years. safety for kids, bus routes, which save us some money on bus routes if we had sidewalks, and I know moratorium is a bad word around here, but I really think we need to take a close look at that and see if we are ready for it. And we got a lot of catching up to do, and like I say, we just need to look at that seriously. On another note, the mayor and I were invited up to Gowan Field on a veterans meeting, and I just wanted to mention that again, in my previous tenure, I tried to get a lot of the vet groups together because there was so much, excuse me, animosity in between all the groups that it just wasn't possible. But after talking with them here the last 2 months, I think it is coming together a lot better than it was before, and hopefully we can get everybody working together for a common cause. I was told at that meeting that right now we have about 15 vets that are sleeping under our overpasses and over by Simplot Island in tents and everything, and we just, we just need to correct that kind of thing. It's just not fair. So I think we're making progress, Mr. Mayor, in that regard, and I was a little skeptical on whether we could really meet the needs of that building over there that's so beautiful, and that the city was kind enough to allow us to renovate. But I think we're on the right track now, and I am confident that we're going to meet the expectations of the city and the vets that we serve. So that's all.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Councilor Doty.
Nothing additional for tonight.
Thank you very much. Councilor Williams.
Mr. Mayor, if I could speak over the train whistle.
Fix that, yeah.
We timed that
Can you
just
fix
right.
that,
So
please?
we're working on it. So.
A couple things, briefly. Councilman Doty and I, along with a couple others, have already interviewed one potential applicant, well, not potential applicant, one applicant, one potential candidate for the Director of Aviation position, and we have 2 more coming up this week, if I'm not mistaken. And at least one other applicant in the wings if we choose to interview that. But just so the council knows, we're moving ahead with this interview process to do our best to select the best candidate to be the Director of Aviation. And then I just wanted to note, and I'm thankful that the Lieutenant and the DC are still here. Hi, there you are. I noticed that. But again, commendation to our investigations division. I know many of them pulled 20-hour day again yesterday, but they worked their tails off, and were able to get resolution. The press release would say it better than I, but they took into custody someone who is believed to have committed a violent and felonious act, and it was through hard work and a very, very long day on top of a very long couple of weeks. And so commendation to not just our investigations, but to the entire team.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Councilor Allgood.
Kind of refer to Councilor Register's situation here. When I made that decision to move that subdivision forward, I have received counsel from Mark Hilty, hearing what Missy has said tonight, hearing what our mayor said. We cannot make these votes subjectively. We have to follow the rules. What Councilor Doty read is federal standards. They're not City of Caldwell standards or federal standards. And we open ourselves up for lots of trouble when we don't follow our own rules. If we are going to do something differently than what we're doing, then we need to find a way to legally change the rules in our code. And that code has to match federal and state standards. I totally agree with both of you that I don't like that subdivision there. But to follow the rules, I mean, in other cities, they wouldn't even be before us. If it matched the rules, it would just happen. I don't like the idea that I'm giving in or not strong enough to vote against it. I'm voting what the rules say I have to do. And I feel like, I mean, like you said, well, we're protecting the taxpayers. Yes, we are. We don't want to get sued. We don't want to pay a bunch of money because we voted for something that was against what state, federal, our own rules say. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I meant by that, by the pressure, is the pressure by the code that says that we have to do something, not necessarily that anybody's strong enough or not strong enough, but that if we don't have something in the code that gives us the authority to vote the way that we feel fit, then we are being pressured by the code, no matter what. I don't even know if it's a possibility to give us authority to vote if we feel fit or if we have to follow. I still stand by the fact that I think there was a place in the code that we could have voted against, the one that I cited, and maybe that needs to be clarified or rewritten so that it's not so open for interpretation. But I think it's a conversation that we all should be part of and figure out, okay, so if we're just going to leave this the way it is and they meet these requirements, do they need to come before council? Like, I think it's probably better if they come before council. And if they do, then is it just a courtesy call? You know, because what we did to these people is we said, well, come to our meetings twice and we spent hours listening to testimony when we didn't even have a choice anyway.
You're absolutely right there. I don't like that part of it at all, but as the mayor referred to, this particular developer met all requirements, no variances, no exceptions. Like you said, some cities, they probably wouldn't even have come talk to the council, but yes, I'm not being, I know it's probably not a big surprise, but I follow the rules. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, that was my piece on that. The other thing I had was, and nobody throw anything at me, I am not going to rerun for the legislature. I did that. I don't care for it. That's not my cup of tea. I will rerun for this seat. So that's the first public notice, but anyway.
There you go. It's out. So very good. Yeah, and I don't blame you there. Been there, and Councilor McGee coming right after me can either confirm or deny that as well. So Councilor McGee.
Well, I feel like whatever I say is going to be a little melodramatic after Councilor Allgood. Mayor and council members, appreciate your patience as I'm recovering from this procedure. It's kind of up and down, and appreciate the technology that allows me to participate without being there and being a little bit more comfortable. So that's all I got for tonight, Mayor.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. So I'll just a couple quick notes. So I did forward you. I appreciate Councilor Stoddard bringing up that event we were able to attend. So I did forward that story to all the council. It's called Marbles. It's actually written by, so Carrie French is a really dear friend of hers that she got to know when she joined the military, and was kind of there and part of that when she was killed in Iraq, and a very touching story. And so I forwarded that to all of you so you can read it and learn. I learned a great deal just about Carrie French. And it was neat to be there and to be a part of that. And that statue that they're going to do is just going to be phenomenal. So excited for that, for her to have that, to represent her and all women, military women throughout all of Idaho. And it's going to be here in Caldwell, Idaho. So that's going to be a pretty cool deal on that. And maybe just I'll touch a little bit on kind of what was discussed earlier and kind of, obviously future discussion. And so it really comes down when the council is going to decide on these things is, as you hear, sometimes heard of as the heavy hand of government. And how heavy do you want it to be? How light do you want it to be? Because within the city code, and I'm talking more perhaps the zoning code rather than the subdivision code, which has been referenced a lot tonight. So the zoning code is really specific about what you can and cannot do in the city of Caldwell. Determining on your zoning, the size of your parcel, how tall you want your building, whatever that is. And so, if you have a C3 property, and you want to put in a convenience store, that's an outright allowed use. You don't have to go and ask anybody on that. So it's just allowed. You can go and do it. And so that, that's where you start to get into, and so it's very, complex. So it's not just, okay, we want this, we don't want that, we want this, we want that. Because you also have to consider both sides, right? You need to look at the property rights of, yes, those people that lived out there, and I grew up in that area, so I know it very well, but you also have to look at the property rights of the people that own the property. So if you're taking away from one, adding to the other on that. So it's kind of kind of that double-edged sword and looking at both sides of it. You know, because obviously as a property owner, you have property rights. So if you have property and you know that the code says you can do this, and then somebody comes back and says, actually, no, we're not going to let you do that, do you feel like some of your property rights have been taken? So it kind of cuts both ways on that. So you got to be aware of that. So it's a lot. I mean, it really gets into deep discussion, and obviously we don't have time for all that tonight, but just things to think about and kind of maybe ponder as we look at that and see, you know, where does council want to land on some of these? Do they want to have greater restrictions in some areas, less restrictions on other, or greater all around? But you know, it's a delicate line to balance, and you don't want to be too heavy laden on the people, because people should have rights and should have property rights. So it doesn't have too much of a burden on them, but then also not infringing on the rights of those around them, because those people have rights too. So it's looking at, you know, all sides and angles of it. So it's really, really important on that. But I know that those are not easy decisions on either side of it. And so, as I say, that's why you get paid the big bucks, even though it's not, but appreciate the time and effort that council puts in the decisions. And I know you don't take those lightly on either side of those. And so it's important for that, and for both people, for the applicant and for the people that come to testify, whether for, against, or neutral on it. So appreciate our planning and zoning director and guiding that and leading that, and so we can have future discussions on that and see where the council wants to lie. But again, it's, you know, make sure you look at, when you want to change one thing, it's going to change the other. So you want to look at both sides of that and take that into consideration. And with that, I will conclude so we can end before 8 o'clock tonight. And again, just a congratulations to Mr. McDonald on that, and excited to be working with him in that capacity. And again, a big thank you to the gentleman in the back on all of his work and effort as our Public Works Director for the past several years. So, yeah, you bet.
Mayor and Council, I just wanted to follow up on a project that came before you a couple meetings ago in June. It was a request for reconsideration for Copper Point subdivision. I just wanted to let you know what happened in that situation. We actually have some conflicting sections within our code, within Chapter 10, and then also within the administrative section that allows for, and I wrote it down because I'm not as familiar with it, the contested hearing procedures. The language is very vague on annexations. It's pretty clear on Category B and C annexations, but it's kind of vague on Category A annexations if the city will allow somebody to come request it. Now, in saying that, the statutory requirements for annexations says that you don't have to. There is no judicial review process for Category A annexations. However, some cities choose to make more lenient codes to allow anybody to come request a reconsideration for something, or you'll see like an appeals chapter in the code. There's nothing in the statutes that allows for appeals. Cities just do that to give the public more opportunity for communication to the council or the boards before the judicial review happens. You'll even see some that allow for mediation. So there was some confusion within our staff on if that was allowed or not. So we accepted that request for reconsideration application. We've thus since then had conversations with legal counsel. We are proposing some amendments to that section of the ordinance that will now really clearly state Category A annexations will not be considered, will not be allowed to have a reconsideration. That'll be going before P&Z next week, and then it'll be coming to council in August for some of those code changes. But I really just wanted to explain the situation, to let you know that this mistake is no reflection on the developer. He did as he was told by city staff. It was a surprise to him when he got to the meeting. We've had conversations with him since then. We've actually reimbursed him for his application fees because we should have never accepted that application. And he does have maybe some plans to come back around through P&Z and council for a revised project for consideration. So I just wanted to make sure there was no negative perceptions of the developer, and our department takes full responsibility for that application coming before you.
Thank you so much. I forgot about that. We did have an opportunity to talk with them, and yeah, we wanted to make sure that it was clear and that. And so thank you for doing that on that. So I know they felt they're like, we just sat there and we probably looked like we didn't know what we were doing, but it was on us. And so we do own that, and we're fixing it, and we appreciate that. And that's kind of what it's about. So if we find something wrong, we need to fix it. So we are. So it was no error on their part. It was they were following the counsel of the city, of our staff, and so we own that one. And I appreciate Robin for remembering that and owning it. So thank you so much on that. So with that, now I stand for a motion for adjournment.
I move.
And a second, and all those in favor?
Aye.
And that passes, and we are adjourned.